I'm Javier Espinoza, EU Executive Editor of the Capital Forum, a new voice in EU policy news. And it's a great pleasure to be here today with Enrico Letta, former Italian Prime Minister, former MEP, President of the Jacques Delors Institute, and Dean of the IE School of Politics, Economics and Global Affairs. I've been practicing the long title of your current role, and it's also very great pleasure to be here in, it's weird to say, but cloudy and cold Madrid. Thank you.
Yes, very cloudy and very cold today.
Yeah, so quite unusual, and I guess maybe fitting for the unusual times that Europe and the world is living these days. You are the author of a landmark, the first report on the status, the diagnosis of the single market in over a decade. You went around traveling the world, over 60 cities, I believe, 400 meetings. If there is a voice of Europe in the face of what actually needs to happen and how to do it, there's no better person than you. Can you tell us, before we get into the specifics of the report, and you tell us about the journey of this diagnosis of the single market and why it was necessary to do so?
The journey was necessary to have new ideas. New ideas, they can come from the ground, and that was the case. But the journey was also very important to understand what is the feeling today about Europe, what people are waiting, expecting from Europe. And for instance, the journey was the way to focus on the idea of a very pragmatic and concrete report. Mm-hmm. It was because of the journey that I had immediately in mind the idea not to propose any treaty change. And I insist on that because it's one of the most important aspects of the report. The fact to be very pragmatic, very concrete. This report is not a flag of the Europeanism. I am very pro-European. I'm an ideological pro-European. But the leaders, the European leaders, asked me to write a report on what is feasible today in the present situation. And the present situation is a situation in which, if we start with a struggle between the national flags on the one hand and the European flag on the other hand, I think it's a mess. And with the current challenge and threats that we are receiving from Trump, mm-hmm. It's not the moment to waste time. It's the moment to be very pragmatic. And pragmatism today is the only way to keep together the different nuances, the different positions, and to try to overcome the problems we're having on competitiveness that are, at the end of the day, problems of dimension, fragmentation, and you can address these problems both from a sovereignist and from the European point of view. Mm-hmm. I know it's a difficult exercise, but if you give a look to the current composition of the European Council, I think it's absolutely necessary to be inclusive and to try to find agreement among different positions. Mm-hmm. This is a sort of, I would say, recipe with some ideas on how to keep together people from different backgrounds with a common mission, and the common objective is, I would say, making Europe more competitive, repatriating jobs and capitals, having growth and being able to be more independent and autonomous in a moment in which, if we are not good on that, we will find someone from abroad telling us, behave, otherwise I switch off. And I think the risk and the threat to be not independent, but to be dependent on someone private, for instance, just to be very clear on that, I think we should put in a placard at the top of the Berlaymont the famous tweet from Elon Musk It was a tweet to the Ukrainians. Behave, otherwise I switch off, or something similar. If I switch off, you collapse in 1 minute. But in reality, is a perfect statement for all of us, the Europeans, to understand that we have to be independent.
The stakes are high, the ambitions are even higher in a very disparate, often super different, people and countries and ideologies trying to be brought together. I want to, before we get into the content, I was curious just to hear, and you've written a book about your experience of all this travel. I mean, all these people, all these meetings, all these cities. What stuck with you? Because obviously this is a collective effort. You say it in your writings, your report. What do you remember? A specific meeting, or a person, or something that someone said to you in this journey?
But first of all, it was the way to understand that the fragmentation is the true reason of our decline. For instance, my first idea was to have this journey by high-speed train, because high-speed train is the usual way in which we travel in our countries. And I immediately realized that it is impossible to connect capitals, European capitals, by high-speed train. You travel, I would say, among the main Visegrad countries, capitals, you have to take a plane. You have to take a plane or to go by car from Luxembourg to Brussels, from Strasbourg to Brussels. It's totally crazy. The fact that we are the smallest continent and we are not connected by high-speed train. Why? Not because we don't have the technology of the high-speed train, but because we have plans, frameworks that are only national and that are conceived as national. So they stop at the borders. The borders, they don't exist anymore, but they still exist. And they are the big problem of the European Union. I always say that if once Xi Jinping will ask to a former Chinese Prime Minister to write a report on the state of the Chinese single market, this former Prime Minister, I would say, could do his journey to prepare the trip by high-speed train. And China is bigger than Europe because all the big Chinese cities are connected by high-speed train. And that was, for instance, is the most evident sense of the journey. Having this journey, I had ideas like that, and I had the experience of these problems. And I can tell you many others, but it's the sense of this collective exercise. But there's another point for me. The collective exercise was good, and it is very good today. Why? Because all the people that I try to involve a lot of people, a lot of associations, a lot of stakeholders, and they are working today on the implementation of the single market integration report. And that, I hope, will make this integration and implementation more successful, because there's this sort of, I would say, common mission. And it is the way to urge the national governments not to put obstacles or to remove obstacles, and to urge and to press the European institutions not to only to present plans, but to follow the presentation of plans in the implementation day by day. The most important moment is the implementation of the launch of the plans. So the big mission is today, and if we are a large collective exercise, a large collective movement of people with this idea to monitoring, I would say, advocacy, pressure, I think that will help. I think you've said a few times that single market is
it's the key phrase to describe what Europe is about, and something that you believe strongly in. Can we just focus on the single market and the diagnosis? We just talked about jobs, capital growth, competitiveness. Can you flesh out for our viewers, our listeners, what's the problem?
The big problem is the fact that the present fragmentation of the single market is something that is creating weakness for the European Union. So we are missing opportunities, we are growing less, we are sending capitals and jobs to the US and to China because of our fragmentation. In other words, I would say that being fragmented, that is the typical, sovereignist approach. I work for my flag. I work for my perimeter. I work for my country. If we continue like that, and this fragmentation continues, this fragmentation will make happy Wall Street, Trump, the US, China, India, and the BRICS, and will be the reason of the decline of the European Union. This is, the main frame.
But it is, no? Your assessment is that I think you've used this metaphor of the plane stalling. It is the reason of the
yes, it is
decline, current decline.
But the key point is to put examples on the table, examples of the daily life of people. And if you start thinking about all this money that is flying from Europe to the US, money of the European savers, that is feeding and strengthening the American economy, the same American companies flying back to Europe to buy our own European companies with our own savings money. That is a little bit crazy, paradoxical, but it's exactly one of the consequences of this fragmentation. The fragmentation of the defense industry. With this fragmentation of our defense industry, of the defense systems, too many types of helicopters, cars, tanks, that means that we are just subsidiarizing the jobs creation in Michigan, Pennsylvania, South Korea, Turkey. We are very generous, but the others are not so generous with us. Mm-hmm. So fragmentation means that hundreds of thousands of jobs are going out of Europe. Fragmentation means that we are not, independent, autonomous on technology. All the big tech today, they are non-European. They are non-European, and they consider Europe as the most interesting market, but they are non-European. All our startups, they are having very good first moment, great ideas, young people, but if they have to find money or an ecosystem to scale up, they go to the US and they bring their, all their skills to the US. I could continue, but the key point is that all these examples are the result of a fragmentation. Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, for all the financial market, at the end of the day, it's impossible to have European champions. We have national champions, and we try to mask them with the idea to be European champions, but they are national. All the brands we have in Europe are brands with a nationality. And I'm not blaming that. I'm just, saying that it has a consequence. And the consequence is that the neighboring country is limiting the growth and the possibility of this financial protagonist to grow up. Mm-hmm. Because if he is French, the Italians will say, oh, he's French. If he's German, the French will say, hey. And it is always the same in Europe, always with this idea that our competitor is our neighboring country. Our competitor is China, India, the BRICS, the US. These are our competitors. This is the key issue. And the fragmentation risks to be the coffin of European competitiveness without being aware of that. So my report starts with this big mission, trying to make aware people in Europe that fragmentation is a minus, and fragmentation is today the reason why we are making happy Wall Street, Trump, China, India, the BRICS, the US.
Very dramatic. And you mentioned EU champions, defense, digital, all these things I want to talk to you about. But just to go back, so the diagnosis and the urgency is very clear. And I think the mindset of each for their own seems at the core of this sort of fragmentation. How do we, it seems like we need sort of like a reset of, it's almost cultural, it's historical, it's almost, it seems to me daunting, almost impossible to fix the way French see Germans and the other way around.
But in reality, there's a cultural, political part of that, but there are also some details that we can immediately fix with a screwdriver. I always had in mind the idea of the founder of the single market, Jacques Delors, had always this approach that was for me fantastic, combining the soul, the heart, on the one hand, and the screwdriver. Both are fundamental to be successful in Europe, because you have some screwdriver that you have to use, we say, to fix some important steps of our integration. And for instance, one of these screwdrivers today is the creation of the Savings and Investments Union. Moving from the old and unsuccessful Capital Markets Union to the Savings and Investments Union today could be a great step to re-attract investments, to keep private money in Europe, to invest this private money with good returns, better returns for savers, is a way also to make Europe more popular among people. If you say, hey, we are creating a tool that can give you a better return for your savings, that could be a great success. And second success, if we turn it in a bridge to investments in financing all the public goods that today are not financed in Europe, how to accompany the transition, the green transition, the digital transition. Can we accept that all the discussion on the Green Deal today is a discussion among those, between two groups of people? One group saying that we have to keep the Green Deal as it is today, without any change. It's the Bible and we have to, and the rest of the group saying that the Green Deal will be the disaster for our economy, our industry. So all the efforts, they have to be to, we say, how to sabotage and to block the Green Deal, to postpone delays and so on. I think there's a third way. The third way is to say the mission of the Green Deal is the right one. We have to accompany with how to finance this mission, to avoid social backlash, to avoid industrial backlash, to be good in spreading the benefits, but we need money to do so. We don't have public money today, so the only way is to create this Savings and Investments Union to mobilize public capitals. The US are today successful on some of the most important issues, artificial intelligence, space, because of private money, not because of capital, public capitals. And we have to consider that this is for us a big challenge, but we can be successful because creating the Savings and Investment Union is it seems technical, but it is a strong engine. And I have to say that the obstacles are very reduced. I see a lot of European countries considering that we have to move. we have to move. We have to create this financial market, single market. So the European Commission started, in my view, going in the right direction, presenting the Commissioner Albuquerque, the Vice President Séjourné, President von der Leyen. They presented this first option for the Savings and Investments Union. And there are many other projects in the pipeline. So I see the Commission really very committed. And for me, it's a great news.
And I think you are also, I like the way that you're linking something that is technical with what it means for the people and for the countries. And one observation I've had in my peers as well is that often perhaps Brussels is not very good at conveying a message that goes beyond, say, it's going to benefit a few banks. I like the way that you're thinking about the messaging.
But one of the reasons why on finance we were not good in integrating the financial market is also because it was always a topic, I would say, only for experts on finance. And for the leaders, it was not their cup of tea. For the very simple reason that if you say to your voters, hey, people, we are giving you the Capital Markets Union, it's easy that the first reaction of any citizen is to say, hey, listen, it's not for me, it's for my banker, or it's for the one working in insurances, so it's for a very reduced group of people.
Not a very popular message.
Not a very popular message. This is why moving to this idea of helping savers first, giving them better returns, long-term certainties, and mobilizing private capital to create big investments on these common goods. At the end of the day, all these common goods are linked by the word security. That is today the most important one. Security today means not only tanks. We know very well. I'm here in Madrid, in the tower of IE. Some days ago, we were obliged to evacuate thousands of students because of the apagón, because of the blackout. And we had the experience of 9 hours within the capital without electricity. And we know very well that this is the big threat for the future. Security means being able to react to that and not to be completely, I would say, vulnerable. So I don't think that the problem of security is Russian tanks crossing our borders. The main problem is vulnerability. Vulnerability means cybersecurity, means investments in what is absolutely necessary on the ground, and being able to detect what is happening, to be protected by satellites, and to know in case what the Russian they want to do, and to protect our borders on the eastern side of Europe. But at the same time, I think security is a larger frame. Security means, for instance, being energy independent. Mm-hmm. Security means being technologically independent. Security means having a strong, united financial market, not being depending on others. That is security.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And going on the topic of security and sovereignty, one buzzword of this commission, I guess it's been there before, but it has more strength these days, is the idea of the EU champions, which you alluded to a little bit earlier. So I want to focus a little bit on this idea of EU champions, and I guess it touches on these nationalistic views of sectors. One solution that you outlined in your report was this idea of consolidating specifically the telecommunications sector, one that is controversial among many of the EU officials that I speak to. I can tell you it's almost like a dogma, a religion, that this is definitely not the case, that technically not possible. These are operators that are, in their own markets. I cannot move my subscription from Proximus in Belgium to one in Orange in Madrid. These are, markets operating in silos. But you have, to some in Brussels, the controversial idea of talking about M&A, basically, in the telco sector. Can we talk about this a little bit more and how you see it play out?
If I give a look to the big picture today is a picture where the Americans, they have 3-4 operators. The Chinese, they have 3-4 operators. We have around 80 operators. I think we can find a good compromise. Between 3 and 80, there's, for instance, 15, 20, 25. That can be good for competitiveness and good for consumers.
Mm-hmm. In what sense? Why?
No, the key point is to move from 27 markets to 1, because I understand very well that if we have 20 European operators in 27 markets, that means that the consumer won't be happy. That's I totally agree with that problem. The key point is that, is there a reason why there's the Slovenian telecom market separated from the Croatian telecom market, separated from the Austrian telecom market, separated from the Italian telecom market? Is there a reason why there's the Estonian telecom market separated from the Lithuanian one? And we are, by inertia, we are in scenarios. If you give a look to this scenario, from abroad, you say they are crazy. They are absolutely crazy. What is the reason? Which is the reason why they have 27 telecom markets? There's no reason at all. We can easily have one telecom market in Europe that would be, I would say, smaller than the Chinese one, even smaller than the Chinese one or the Indian one, and so on. But at the same time, having one means that we can have a number of operators, 10, 15, 20, bigger than the present operators. They can become European champions. Mm-hmm. Today they are not. All the names that we can have, they are national champions. They are not European champions. Mm-hmm. And being national champions is a limit for them. So my point is to open up the Pandora box, maybe, of the discussion about creating a European single market on telecom. Of course, we need steps, we need some consolidations, we need some movement, but we need to, I would say, reassure national treasuries that they will get the same amount of fees that they have today from the operators, because I know very well that this is the main obstacle. But frankly speaking, those telling me that it's impossible to have a European spectrum, we have to continue with the Slovenian one, the Croatian one. Frankly speaking, I think that these inertial approaches are the main problem that we are having. So I think we can move in that direction with the idea to have different steps of consolidation and giving all the guarantees to the consumers. The consumers today, they are, I would say, they have guarantees. We are in a good situation, and we have to thank the European Commission because of that. Mm-hmm. I'm not among those, I would say, blaming the European Commission for being too much rigorous on that. The European Commission applies the rules, existing rules. I think we have to change the rules, and we have to move from 27 to 1. There's no reason to have 27 telecom markets. Mm-hmm. I can understand that it's not something that you can have in 6 months, but in 5 years we can get this result. And like with the euro, there will be one day in which We will try to see what was the past, and today we laugh. Thinking at lira, at peseta, as Fiorino, and so on. We are just laughing. But how difficult was at that time to think, I will lose my lira. Today we are just laughing to think that, well, not laughing, but we are happy all to have the same, how we say, single currency and the same single system. So I think there are some steps where it is complicated to have the first step, but once you are there, you see all the, I would say, the plus. And I'm sure that on the telecom system, it will be the case. We will have bigger operators, bigger European champions, able to play at world level. Today, they are not, or they are, I would say, suffering. So I think we have to consider that industrial policies is something important, of course, with the protection of the consumer.
And the protection, just to finish on this point of the consumer, is the thing that I'm sure you've spoken to many of the people whose power it is to actually enable or block this consolidation. And they just think that if this happens, it will lead immediately to higher prices and less innovation.
But listen, I have 3 mobiles. One, my country mobile, Italy. I lived in France for years, so I keep my French mobile. Now I'm in Spain, I have a 3rd mobile. In each of these countries, I choose among 4 or 5. What I would like to say is that we can have a European telecom market where, as consumer of Italian citizenship working in other countries, I can easily choose among 10, 15, 20. I think the consumer is much more protected than the present situation because I can choose among different proposals that can give me, I would say, with different targets that can be more focused and at the end of the day more successful.
Interesting. We talked about security earlier, and you mentioned defense now a few times, and it's at the forefront of the discussions that are happening in member states. In Brussels, we have a war going on. It's top of mind. It's really, really crucial. And in your report, you talk about this Europeanization of the defense supply chain. There's been a lot of talk on this idea of consolidation. The defense stocks in Europe have gone up. Do you see early signs that we might see some deal activity in that sector? Do we need it? Is it important to, do you know, your bigger goals on competitiveness and growth and bringing capital to the continent?
It is absolutely clear that today is one of the main issues. It was not an issue in the last years. It became because of the new threats and the new scenario. And I think we have to be, once again, we have to consider that the dimension and fragmentation in 27 is one of the most important weaknesses that we have. So the key point is first to help industrially to have some consolidation, mergers, scale up that are absolutely necessary. And then to have at the European level not 16 helicopters but 2 or 3. That is one of the reasons of our difficulty. Draghi's report is very precise on that, and I really agree with the conclusion of this report. At the same time, we need to work together as defense systems. I think the presence today of a commissioner for defense is a very good point. I would like really to say something important on what Thierry Breton did in the last legislature and what Commissioner Kubilius is doing today. The first commissioner for defense, there's the decision from von der Leyen was the right one, and the possibility now to raise and to grow up on this role is something very meaningful. So I hope that these first steps will be followed by implementations, and is the most complicated issue because we are coming from decades of total separated work. And fragmentation here is more than fragmentation. So I think we have really to work, and it's absolutely necessary to do it. But we have a great pressure from abroad. And what is happening in the world, what is happening around us, is giving us a great wake-up call. And I see von der Leyen very much determined on that. Of course, there was this mistake of frame rearm EU. That was a big mistake, I think. We need to consider that, once again, the true term is security. Mm-hmm. And within security, there's the consolidation of the defense supply chain, the defense systems. But you know what is happening, and I would say what Trump is doing is a great wake-up call. We are not at the end of the 4 years of Trump. We are at the beginning. So I think we have to be aware of that. And what he said about Greenland is a great wake-up call for all of us. The next presidency of the European Council of Ministers will be Denmark. So I have great expectations of what the Danes can do on that.
It should be very interesting. Coming here and reading your report and talking to people who have read your report in quite detail, I was brainstorming on potential other sectors that maybe you didn't tackle in terms of this idea of growth and competitiveness, such as, for instance, the luxury brands. Fashion is, one of these hallmarks of Europe. When you think about Europe, you think about fashion, and also the food and drink sectors. I wonder if you've given it any thoughts on.
But in reality, these sectors are the sectors where the single market worked well. Mm-hmm. Because single market had a great success on goods, first of all on goods. We are great, we are strong, and Trump is obliged to negotiate with the European Commission. That is, I think, the greatest satisfaction for all the Europeans to see Trump negotiating with the European Commission.
Do you think because of the strength of this sector?
Of course, mm-hmm. Of course.
And what, can you flesh out that a little bit more, that idea? I think it's interesting.
Because we are, Trump attacked the German cars. And he said, I will attack the German cars, tariffs on the German cars. And then the reaction was united at the European level. Why? Because any German cars are, 1/3 or 50% is done in Italy, in Spain, in Poland. So Europe is really united there. Even the luxury system or food and drink, all these topics are topics where you have brands that are really European brands. At the end of the day, that is the reason why the single market was the greatest success. So my key point is on innovation tech. On that, the proposal that I put in the report of the fifth freedom, so how to add a fifth freedom to the four freedoms. We had until now the freedom of movement of goods, services, people and capitals. It is very much 20th century economy based. You miss here the intangible. And the intangible is what makes the difference today. So for me today, the most important part is to transform this flagship that I put in the report. Mm-hmm. The fifth freedom is something that can, combined with the savings and investments union and the way in which we can finance the innovation with also private capitals, it can be the true engine for the European Union to be the future and not only the past. We have to break this narrative that usually is the narrative that from the US or from other part of the world they are looking at us. We are not the past, we are the future. A future with a great past, and we are proud of our past. But we are the future, and we are the future because at the end of the day, Europe is the place where people want to come from all the different corners of the world. And if people want to come here, that means that people consider this place is a great place for the future. But if we are fragmented, we are not at the level of being competitive with the great giants today. You know, this is the key point. I usually use the example of my own country. Italy, 60 million people yesterday when the single market was created, 60 million people today. When the single market was created, Italy was as big as China and India together. And today, I don't want even to say what is the difference between Italy and China and Italy and India. But this is the key issue. What happened in the last 30 years is the fact that the world moved from 3 billion people to 8. And the 5 were not Europeans. So this is the big change. It's the biggest change in the history of humanity. It's the biggest change in the economic history. We have to organize ourselves to be competitive in this new world, and we are a small continent, and all our countries that thought to be and still think to be great powers, because they were our countries, they were the big powers in the world. But today we are not. It's very simple. We are not. The European Union is, I always repeat, is divided in two groups of countries. The small countries and the countries they don't know they are small. We are all small countries in the world of today. Even Germany, France are provinces of China.
Or the size of a state in the US.
And after China, we'll have India, then we'll have Indonesia, we'll have Nigeria, we'll have Pakistan, countries with a number of people that are at the level of the entire European Union. And we have the telecom market divided between Slovenian, Croatian, Latvian, Estonian.
I get the picture, and I want to talk to you about the fifth freedom because that's really worth exploring. But just to wrap up this idea of EU champions and consolidation, one idea that comes across your proposals is this idea of, you know, the EU champions on the telecom sector, and hinting maybe a cross-border, you know, consolidation. I have detected there was a deal of this private equity group TPG trying to buy Telecom. This was in the sustainability sector. We don't need to talk about the specifics of this deal, but it was abandoned recently because of the threat that the EU was not going to clear it. I'm just pointing at early signs that the people in charge of the execution of the approval or not of mergers are not in line with this idea of consolidation. But it's an early sign, and obviously we're not going to talk about this particular deal, but I'm just singling it out as a sign.
I want to defend the Commission. The Commission applies rules. In the case of telecom market, the rules are rules having this fragmented in 27. So they try to have competition within each single market. What is not working is that we need to have a European single market, and this is the same for the rest. Is the same for the banking system. We are still 27 banking systems, not or 20 if we consider the euro, not one with all the national rules and so on. If we don't trust each other, it is impossible to be successful. We need to trust each other. And trusting each other is the only way to build up Europe. I think it is necessary to build up Europe, and today is the only way to survive at world level.
Interesting. On the fifth freedom idea, as I understand it, is this freedom of movement, of innovation and education, and in the part of digital markets, which you also mentioned, I'm really curious about your thoughts on how we can unlock the potential of Europe there, the monopolies of You know, we're not talking about a European Google or Facebook for a reason, right? All the innovation is elsewhere. And we have rules that are aimed at putting a straitjacket to some degree to the ones that have already become quite large and powerful, mostly Americans, to enable the creation of the fostering of innovation of the technology in Europe. It doesn't seem to be working. I was wondering on your observations on digital is key, as I understood.
I put three topics that are important. One is training, second one is intellectual property, and third one is financing. Training. We are here in a university, i.e. in Madrid. We are still struggling at the European level with this problem of mutual recognition of the non-existing European degree and so on. If we want to be competitive at world level, we need to have a European system and not to work only at national level. So this is the first key point. I'm very happy because I see the Commission very much involved in that. And is one of the priorities. The same for intellectual property, patents, and so on. We need to protect the intellectual property, we need to protect research there, and we need to create a European system more and more. But the most important part is how to finance innovation and research, because today we are not able to finance innovation and research only through national financial markets. We need to have it at European level, and we don't. Is another reason why Savings and Investments Union is so important and so crucial, and we have to work in that direction. So these are only some of the topics, but it is clear that on this issue we can be successful. We need to avoid the exodus of our researchers or PhD people, and we have to keep them here in Europe. We have to pay well them, and we have to give them the possibility to scale up in their ideas. That is not the case for mentality, for cultural problems, and also because we don't find enough money to do so. So I think here there's a big boost. The European Research Council, the European Innovation Council, they are doing a great job. All these, we say, protagonists of the European debate were part of my, we say, preparation or my big hearing and discussing debate, and I thank them very much for all the insight, the participation, the ideas, and also I would like to thank all the national different places where I had the opportunity to discuss on these topics. I saw fantastic energy with the big request to the European institutions and to the national leaders: give us please the tools to fight at world level.
Yeah.
And that is today not the case.
Interesting. And tools, you mentioned money, you mentioned changing culture. What place do you see in terms of rules to break the digital monopolies that we have now? How important are they in this tool set?
On that, I am confident that Europe has the right approach. I think the problem is the American antitrust that is a little bit less focused on that. But yes, it is part of that, and it is clear that we have to create the right, the good ground to make possible this scale up and this growth.
When you say the American antitrust, I guess what you mean is that they are less interventionist, that they're less willing to
Today, the US are not a place where the true, I would say, capitalistic values, where the antitrust, the conflict of interest. What Trump is doing is the way to say conflict of interest, I don't care, it's not an issue. because I'm elected by the people. I can tell you that it is one of the pillars of democracy and of capitalism, is to have correct rules and correct applications of rules of conflict of interest. And if you start from the top, having a president saying that, what does it mean, conflict of interest? I think is the big problem.
And as we reach the end of this interview and we mentioned Trump, a lot has changed since you wrote this report. The world, a lot changed since the earlier report that preceded you by Mario Monti, and it feels that since you wrote the report, the world changed even more dramatically so with Trump too. And trade was not a big feature, as I understand it, in your report. Any thoughts of a follow-up report that would include trade?
I can tell you that first, Trump is a big, I would say, boost of my report, and I thank him very much. On trade, I think that the European Union has to trade, Trump or not Trump, no matters what Trump will do. But of course, with Trump so aggressive, is another reason to be so Mercosur, ASEAN, I think Africa, we have to be very proactive on that. We have to
find new friends elsewhere, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of friends, but they think that we are not so generous. They think that we close everything and we close ourselves in a fortress. And I think we have to move.
Mm-hmm. Are you working on a follow-up on your report?
Yes, we are working with a network of universities, think tanks. The law centers are involved in that. This university is part of that. I created an AREL, a single market lab in Rome. Mm-hmm. So is the way to try to make the network connected, all the people working for this report, for the single market, and to try to boost and to give a future, because it is clear that now we have to implement. Also the ideas that worked, the most creative ideas that were interesting for meetings, but now they have to become strong in implementation. The idea of the 28th virtual state, for instance, 28th regime, that is in my view one of the most important one. The idea to say, without cancelling the 27 corporate laws, that is impossible for political reasons, we can create this 28th virtual state corporate regime for SMEs, for startups. That can be a sort of passport tool to simplify, because we are all asking for simplification. But what does it mean in concrete? This is a good idea on how to simplify. Or the other idea, I put it at the end, is one of the most important points and the easiest of my report, is to say stop with directives, go only with regulations. Directive means not creating the level playing field, creating a mess in the way in which each country is applying the directives. Regulations is the only way to create the level playing field, and the single market is part of that. The single market has two big pillars. One is the social cohesion, as Jacques Delors always said, and as I try to say also in my report, all the chapter on the freedom to stay is on that. And at the same time, the single market needs this level playing field in terms of rules, that today is not the case.
Your report is not the first report, and we know what happened when Mario Monti wrote his report. It was overtaken by huge crises. Are you worried that this might be the case now? After all, we are living in momentous upheaval, we could say.
There's this risk, but my feeling is that these crises are pushing the European institutions, the national leaders, to consider that maybe the solutions in my report, in Draghi's report, on defense in the Minister report, on research and technology in the Heitor report, can be implemented, and we need not to waste time. We need to go.
if we meet 5 years from today, how would you measure the success of your vision for the single market?
The three topics, savings and investments union, telecom markets, and energy market, are the thermometer to be, as I would say, satisfied or not.
Enrico Letta, thank you very much.